I got home and went straight to bed. I was yet to get my wolf, so my healing capacity was slower than others with their wolves. I hated my life. I lay in bed and wept. Rob had ruined everything. I wanted to use that money to escape this place. I had saved enough to bribe the wolves at the border and leave. How was I going to leave now? I woke up from sleep the next day and found my mother sitting at the foot of my bed. She had tears in her eyes, and I figured she had come to talk to me about my decision to kick her out of my father's house. But my mind was made up. She had failed me, and I expected nothing more from her. "What are you doing in my room, Mom?" "You and Rob should be packing," I said, and she was crying. That was when I noticed that my bags had been packed. "What the?" I exclaimed. "So sorry, Desiree. I had no choice. We need money to get by here, and no one would take me or Rob to work for them. So we are sending you instead," she said, crying. And I jumped off the bed. "You do not have the right to do that," I yelled at her, and she cried, and that was when the loser walked in. He must have been listening. "It is still months to your 18th birthday, so technically we can do that. And we have," Rob said with a dirty grin across his face. "Mom," I yelled. But she didn't answer. "Get up, brat. Your new station awaits you," Rob said, and I shook my head. "No, you can't make me do anything," I said to him. "And neither can she. I want you two out of my father's house," I yelled at them. And he began to laugh. He left the door and walked into the corridor. Two hefty men walked in and they carried me. The men were called enforcers. They were Moon Zeta breeds employed by the king to enforce duty and laws among the moons. Usually minors hated resuming jobs their guardians or parents secured for them. The enforcers made sure they resumed their jobs. Rob must have known I wouldn't go easily, and that was why he brought them. I began to scream, asking them where they were taking me. But they did not answer. "Rob found you a job at the blood pack house, and the wages are good," my mother said in tears. "Who will be collecting the wages?" I asked her, and she couldn't answer. "I swear I will come back for both of you," I yelled as the men took me away. My mother carried my bag and put it into the trunk of the car I was locked in. "I hate you," I yelled at my mother as the car drove away with me in it. I cried bitterly. I knew what must have happened. My mother must have told Rob that I was kicking them out. So he devised the evil plan of using the guardian authority to sign me up for a job at the pack house, knowing I would not be able to leave even when I come of age. Although it was paid employment, it was a mild form of slavery. And my mother had allowed her mate to do this to me. I meant what I said, that I would come for both of them. I dried my tears and kept quiet as the enforcers drove me to the blood pack territory. We arrived at the pack house, and the driver drove to the back. There were two doors at the back. One read, "Bloods Only," and the other read, "Service Only." We went through the service-only door. The place stunk. It was musty, dark, and old. "This is the service quarters," one of the men told me. The place was very unkept. I was ushered to a room that had 3 bunk beds and 6 dressers. The room stunk of piss, and I wanted to vomit. I was valedictorian for Goddess' sake, and look at what my mother and her mate did to me. They laid waste to all my hard work in school. I was reduced to scrubbing toilets and cleaning floors. "You are at the bottom on the right. The 6th dresser is yours. Clear the stuff that is in it," one of the enforcers said, and I wasn't comfortable touching other people's things. "What about the owner of the stuff?" I asked, unwilling to touch someone else's stuff. "She is dead," he answered, and I was afraid. "Your duty is simple. Clean all the toilets in the night when the Bloods have gone to bed, and serve and work in the kitchen and dining hall in the morning when the Bloods are having breakfast. You have the rest of the hours to yourself. Do not wander to the blood section, or you will be punished. If caught more than 3 times, severe actions will be taken against you. Your guardian will receive your wages. You can go to them to collect money for your upkeep. The pack will not provide anything for you other than your wages." "Am I clear?" he asked. And I nodded, knowing I was in a deep mess. How the hell will I survive? My stepfather wasn't going to give me my money, and my mother was a coward and a stupid woman. Is there a way I can receive my wages? I asked the man, and he nodded. You can apply when you are 18, he replied, and I was relieved. Where do I apply, please? I asked the man, a bit happy, and he told me to do so at the help desk at the guard post. I thanked him, and they left me alone to get comfortable. I was going to pay my mother and her mate back in the meanest way ever. I just had to find a way to survive for some months, after which I will apply to receive my wages and sell off my father's house. I opened the dresser, started to clear it of the former owner's stuff. The person's journal was there, and I decided to hang on to it. I will spend time reading it. Maybe I could avoid some of her mistakes, if any, in the process. I arranged some of my things into the dresser and went to look for the bathroom to freshen up. As I walked in, I made sure I read signs, so I do not enter any blood territory and get into trouble with them. I found the dingy toilet allocated to the Moons, and I went to use it. Apart from the place being old and most of the facilities broken down, the workers were kind enough to keep it clean. I cleaned up after myself once I was done, and then headed out. I returned to my room to arrange the rest of my stuff. I found an envelope with a letter and money inside my bag. It had my mother's handwriting on it. I reluctantly opened it. Dear Desiree, I am sorry for what I allowed Rob to do to you. Please manage the money in this envelope and don't come home. Once you turn 18, sell the house and all the remaining properties. I will be dead by then. I am sorry I wasn't such a good mother, and I didn't protect you when I should. I never sold your father's things. They were taken from me by the king. I had to keep my head down so I wouldn't come off as a threat to him, because I was the next alpha of the Moon Pack. Rob is an enforcer that works for him, and he was put to monitor us. That was why we couldn't leave him. When I was diagnosed with ash cancer, I was happy because the Moon Goddess had finally decided to put me out of my misery. I missed your graduation because I had to go for treatment, but I learned yesterday that I was no longer responding to treatment. Please find it in your heart to forgive me and know that I always loved you. I did what I did to keep us alive and give us a fighting chance. Now you will have to carry on alone. Be careful, Desiree. All eyes will be on you because of my bloodline. I know you intended to use the money to leave the pack. Please don't. There is a witch war going on outside our borders, and it has claimed the lives of a lot of blood and moon warriors. Please, remain at the Blood Pack house. Roseline the Seer predicts that the war will spill into our territory soon. The ash has already come as she predicted. The war will follow. I know you will be safest at the pack house in the king's territory. Please stay alive for your father and my sake. You are the last of the Dawson and the Johnson bloodline, and the only one that might have the magic of my bloodline in her blood. Please be careful, and no one must know your capabilities. When your wolf comes, and if powers come with her, hide it. Your life will depend on it. I love you so much, it read, and tears began to fall down my eyes. I was surprised that she knew my plans all along and kept it to herself. She must have planned to get me to safety, and this was the best way she could do it. I counted the money. It was all that I had saved and much more. It was enough to survive until my 18th birthday. Moon, someone called out, and I looked at the door. Mousy hair freckled. Faced boy that was about my age stood there with his crescent moon badge indicating he was a moon too. He handed me a blue jumpsuit to wear, which I suspected was my uniform. He had the same on, but his was a bit more decorated than mine. I saw level 5 written on his uniform. Mine had entry level on it. Come, let us serve the late breakfast service, he said after I wore the jumpsuit over my clothes. I tucked the letter into my bra. I intended to find a secret place to hide it when I had the time. I knew I should destroy it, but I knew I wouldn't be able to do it because it was all I had from my mother. I followed the boy to the dining hall, keeping my eyes on the ground. You can look up to serve them, he told me, and I looked up. The dining hall was beautiful. I hadn't seen this much luxury in a long time. While I was admiring the hall, there he was again, the guy that had saved my life the night before. I wouldn't have known it was him if it weren't for the hoodie he was wearing. He was breathtakingly handsome. Chapter 1 has come to a close. Please stay with us as we read through the rest of this story. If you are watching, please give us a like and leave a comment telling us where you are tuning in from. Now, let's continue listening. I tried not to stare at him for too long. I didn't know who he was, and I did not want to violate their rules. I looked at the meals, and they looked delicious. My stomach growled, and I remembered that I hadn't eaten yet. Is there anywhere to buy food? I asked the freckled-faced guy that was standing next to me. Yes, he said, and I relaxed. You can have the same meal they are having for 10 blood dinas, he said. And I was in shock because that was quite expensive. Do you have an idea how much my wages are? I asked the guy, and he nodded. Pretty standard. You are new, so they must be starting you off on the basic, which is 300 blood dinas. By the time you are promoted, you could earn as much as 1,000 dinas per month. He explained with so much pride, and I realized this must be the best job in town for a moon. No wonder Rob wanted me here badly. I was going to surprise him. How do I use my wages to pay for the meals? I asked. You can go to the security post to get meal tickets. They will deduct it from your wages. I know you are hungry, so I will give you one of my tickets. You can always pay me back in future. I am Tim, by the way, he said with a smile, and my heart warmed. I am Desiree, I said, and he smiled. Nice to meet you, Desiree. The Bloods lined up with their trays, and we had to listen to what they wanted and serve it on their tray. I waited for the guy in the blue hoodie to come by, but he never did. He sat at his table with his friends. Don't they eat? I asked him, pointing in his direction. Don't point at him, Desiree. That is Prince Adam Kingston, he said, and I was in complete shock. He is the next alpha and king, Tim said, and I promised myself never to look in his direction again. I did not know, honestly. I am sorry, Tim. I just wanted to thank him for saving my life last night when Nixon attacked me. I explained to him. That is quite odd, Tim said. Prince Adam rarely leaves this environment. You must be lucky, and I think he is staring at you, Desiree. Pray no one saw you point in his direction, Tim said to me, and I became scared and worried. I kept my face down. So I do not see the prince. Oh, goddess, Tim said, and I became sacred. What is it? I asked him with my eyes trained on the ground. He is coming here, Desiree, and he doesn't do that. Tim said, worried and scared. And I became frightened too. I wanted to look up, but it felt like the bones on my neck were rusty. Fear kept my head down. This was my first day. Moon. I heard the deep voice from last night, and I did not know what to do. Good morning, Your Highness, I heard Tim say, sounding very afraid, and I felt bad. Good morning, Your Highness, I quickly said with my head trained to the ground. What is your name, Moon? He asked, and I looked at Tim to be sure who the question was directed to. Realizing it was me, I quickly replied, Desiree, Your Highness, I said quickly. And he paused. Your full name? He asked. Desiree Dawson. I replied, head down. Henceforth, you serve my meals. Tim will let you know what it entails, he said. And I became sacred. Your Highness, she works breakfasts and toilets only. Tim said. Not anymore, I heard Adam say. She serves my meals only. Have them change her job description at the post and raise her pay grade. She is educated, he said, and walked away. All the while, my breath was caught in my mouth. What just happened? I asked him, feeling afraid. I think you just got promoted, he said, sounding a bit baffled. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I asked him. It depends, Desiree. If you have experience being around Bloods, then it means you can cope. which means it is a good thing. If you don't, it means you will easily get into trouble, he said, sounding worried because the latter was most likely my case. Prince Adam stared in our direction for the better part of the late breakfast, and I just wanted to disappear. I just hoped they weren't on to me. My mother's letter was still on me, and the thing she had said spooked me now. This. I hoped for my sake the guy was just trying to be nice. Tim and I cleared the breakfast. I packaged all I could eat with the ticket that Tim gave me and relaxed to eat my meal in the kitchen. It was divine. Haven't had that kind of food for years. Tasting the quality of the food made me realize the moons were truly suffering. After stuffing my face with the delicious meal, I began to feel bad for my people. My mother might have been able to beat the ash cancer if she had good food to eat and a loving mate to care for her. Tears began to stream down my face, realizing I was better off. How come they have this quality of food, Tim? I thought we were in famine. I asked Tim, and he sighed. They took over our farmlands and forced the moon farmers to farm close to the border. The witch wars have prevented our farms from thriving. Most people farm in the gardens of their homes and sell whatever they produce. The moons can only eat what is available, he explained, and my heart broke. You should thank your stars, Desiree. You have the best job a moon could ever dream of, and you seem to have moved up the ranks on your first day. The moon goddess must favor you, Tim said, almost sounding jealous, but in a friendly way. I doubt that, Tim. My life has been shitty for 7 years since my mother got involved with a new mate. I was planning on running away, but I guess I can't anymore. I confessed, and he felt sorry for me. Well, look at the bright side. Prince Adam is interested in you, which means you are likely to get preferential treatment, but with a lot of enemies. Both moons and bloods would hate you for this. You need to be careful and do not trust anyone, Desiree. The prince's meals are important. You have to make sure you are part of the preparation process and always taste his meal in his presence and wait for 30 minutes before he eats it, he said, and I was worried because I knew why all that was necessary. The job seemed luxurious, but it was dangerous too. Bloods prepare his meal and serve him. You will be the first moon to serve the king's heir. You need to be careful, Desiree. If you need help or pointers, don't hesitate to ask for me. And if ever he gets friendly with you, please recommend me to work with you. I could use the raise, he begged, and I smiled at him. I returned to my room after the heartfelt meal and saw that some moon omegas were packing my stuff. What is going on here? I asked. We have been ordered to move you to the blood service quarters, they said, looking sad. There was no way this was a good thing. I could not be surrounded by bloods. I was a moon. They were my betters. On whose orders? I asked. Mine, a harsh female voice said, coming from behind me. I turned around to see a middle-aged woman with blonde hair. She used to be the wife of our Pax Delta until they killed him along with my father. She had a harsh voice, but she was a loving woman. Aunt Margaret, I exclaimed, and went to hug her. She held me tightly. Desiree, why did they send you here? She asked me, looking worried. Rob, was all I could manage between sobs. You need to be careful. I do not know why they are moving you up, but do not trust any of them. Someone powerful is behind you here, which means you will have a lot of blood enemies. Keep your head down at all times. I have arranged a private room that has its toilet and bath for you. All you should do there is sleep and bathe. Make sure you are down here with your kind before they wake, and make sure you retire early before they retire. That is the only way to avoid them. You must live there as if you do not exist. Come to me if you need anything. Your mother has explained everything to me, she said, and winked at me. I hugged her tightly. I was glad that she was there with me. I suddenly did not feel alone anymore. The room I was given was nice. It was small but similar to my living arrangement at home. I had a personal shower and toilet, and I had a wardrobe for my clothes and a standing mirror. My new uniform was brought in. It was a blue-plated blouse and a royal blue skirt that stopped at the knee. It had a crescent moon badge, which indicated I was a moon. I was given sandals to wear and a blue scrunchie to hold my hair up. "Rules, a fat blood woman," said to me in the meanest tone. I kept my face down. "You cannot eat with us in our lounge. You are not allowed to use any of our facilities here. You are not to speak or mingle with blood staff beyond your job description. You are not allowed makeup, and you cannot date or be seen with bloods." "Am I clear?" she asked. "Yes," I replied. "Yes, mistress," she corrected me. "Yes, mistress," I corrected myself, and she left. Honestly, I did not need to wear makeup. I had flawless tan skin with turquoise eyes. My lashes were long and looked almost artificial. My lips were a deep pink close to red. I had wide eyes. I never admired myself in the mirror, but a lot of people complimented my looks. They could think I wore makeup, because my face was almost perfect. I arranged my stuff into the wardrobe and sat on the bed. I noticed my mother had packed my favorite books for me, and the Omegas had included the dead worker's journal that I had taken. I opened it to try to see what she had written, and I was shocked to see that it was full of writings. The worker's name was Alice, and she was 20 years old. It broke my heart to see that she was young. I went to the last pages to see the most recent issue in her life before she died, and I was shocked. My time in this world will come to an end at dawn. Hopefully, I find peace then. I never meant to be fated to Donovan or hinder him from choosing a mate. I did not even know we were fated in the beginning or he couldn't choose a mate because of me. But he is a blood, and I am a moon, fated or not. Our relationship was prohibited. I never did anything with him. I have tried to explain myself, but no one would listen, because he is the son of the Gamma. I am going to be executed, so he can choose a mate from his pack. I am glad because I can finally be at peace," she wrote, and I was in shock. The Bloods were wicked. They executed the poor girl because she was fated to the son of the Gamma. He should have just rejected her so she could live. I knew I needed to read more because the last words she wrote were written in a rush. I put down the journal and decided I would read it during my free hours. Note to self, do not get involved with any blood member. Report to the kitchen. Moon, I heard a voice in my head. I dressed up in my uniform and returned to the kitchen I had eaten. "Over here," I heard someone say, and it was the mistress. I went and stood behind her. "You are to monitor the cooking of his meals and make sure you taste it 30 minutes before he eats," she instructed me. "Yes, mistress," I said with my head bowed. "You are allowed to look at the Bloods on duty," she said, and walked away. 2 ladies in the same uniform I was wearing walked in. The difference was instead of it being blue, theirs was in the shade of deep red with a red full moon badge. "Hello, Moon. I am Chef Sandy, and this is Chef Kate. We cook Prince Adam's meals," one of the chefs said, sounding nice and polite. I didn't know how to react to them, so I just nodded and kept my eyes down. "Come on, Moon. Tell us your name," the other one said. "Desiree," I replied. "That is a sexy name. Moon, do not mind the mistress. Everyone that serves the prince is equal. You can look at us." "I am sure we would be besties," Sandy said, and I looked up and saw their big grins. My, you are beautiful. No wonder the prince wants you serving his meals," Kate said, and I felt a bit embarrassed. "Well, let us get to it," Sandy said, and they began cooking. I stood observing everything they were doing and taking notes too. Apparently, I was to write down the list of ingredients used to make his meals. The ceremony was too much. When I learned he was the only heir, I could understand why. They finished preparing the meal and left. Some blood servers came to take it to Prince Adam's quarters, and I had to follow them to keep an eye on the meal. They took it to an apartment and laid it on the table and left. A young red-haired about my age came out of the room and sat at the table. I kept my head to the ground because she looked like his girlfriend. Prince Adam came out of the room and sat. "Good afternoon, Your Highness," I greeted with my head down. "Look at me when you speak, Desiree Dawson," he commanded, and I looked up at him. I tried very hard not to drool. He was shirtless and had the body of a god. He had dark hair, and his eyes were piercing blue. He looked hard and in charge. "I don't think that is wise, darling. She is a moon. Can't you see?" the red-haired said. "Mind your business, Lola. To me all wolves are equal," he warned her, and my heart warmed a little. "Do not let father hear that," she warned him. "He is His Majesty to you," he corrected. "Not for long," she said, showing him her engagement ring, and I figured who she might be. I tasted the meals in his presence, by adding a spoon of each meal in a plate meant for the service staff. I ate everything, and we all waited for 30 minutes before they dug in. I was full. If this was my job, then I really wouldn't need those meal tickets after all. But I did not want Rob getting my money, so I decided I would ask Aunt Margaret how the money could go to my mother instead of Rob. If it would not be impossible, I will use it all for tickets and see how I can send the meals to her instead. Prince Adam and Lola finished the meal, and I cleaned up. "Do not throw it away, please," Prince Adam said. "Take it to the moon quarters. I am sure they do not get free food there," he ordered me, and my heart warmed at his kindness. "Yes, Your Highness," I said with a smile. "Don't get used to this treatment, Moon," Lola said. "Yes, Your Highness," I said, unsure how to address her. "You pick up quite quickly." "I might just like you," she said. "She is common blood to you for now," Adam corrected. "Do not address her with any titles. Simply yes or no," he instructed me. "Yes, Your Highness," I replied, and I heard Lola complain. "There is nothing wrong with her giving me respect. I will be future Luna and Queen," she pointed out to him. "Leave my room, Lola. Stop trying to get cozy with me, please. I will not touch you until after the wedding. Stop trying to make it seem like we are together," he said, sounding irritated, and I almost laughed. I could swear they were sleeping together, but I knew better now. The girl was trying too damn hard to secure the Luna and Queen position. I guess. The engagement ring wasn't an assurance. I packed up and linked the Blood Omegas to come and take the food to the kitchen. The moment the food got to the kitchen, and they tried to trash it, I politely stopped them. The prince ordered not to throw away the food. "I am to serve it to the hungry moons," I told them, and they left the food quietly. I took the meals to Aunt Margaret, and she was amazed. "This is kind of Prince Adam," she said, and I smiled. "Do you want some?" she asked, and I shook my head. "I ate my fill during the tasting," I said, and she smiled. "You have a very dangerous job, Desiree. You need to be careful. If that young man is going to be sudded, you would ingest it first. If anything happens to him because of his meals, you will be blamed and punished for it. That is why it is only bloods that are given that job," she said with worry in her eyes, and I told her I knew pretty much what she was talking about. "Auntie, is there a way my mother can get my wage instead?" I asked her, and she shook her head sadly. "You can only do that when you are of age. Rob is your official guardian," she said. And I felt bad. "Can I send my meal tickets to her?" I asked, and she nodded. "That you can do, and she can use it to purchase cooked food from blood restaurants without trouble or disrespect," she assured me. And I was happy. My mother deserved good food before she dies. "I will apply for the tickets. Do you mind taking it to her on my behalf?" I asked her, and she nodded. "It will be my pleasure." "Tiffany deserves good meals before she dies," she said with tears in her eyes, and we hugged each other. I left her and hurried to the security post to apply for meal tickets. They were shocked when I told them I wanted meal tickets worth the value of my full wages. "Your wage is 800 blood dinas," the man exclaimed, and I smiled at him. That would get my mother many delicious healthy meals for the month. I took the ticket booklet and gave it to Aunt Margaret. She was shocked at the amount I collected and told me she would take it to my mother in the nighttime. My mother wrote me a thank you letter after she received the tickets. She promised not to share the meals with Rob and eat them at the park before going home. It was the least I could do. Apparently, the tickets could pay for some doctor's appointments too. Whereas she would exchange meal tickets for treatment by moon doctors. The moon doctors would appreciate it because it is a great privilege to afford blood meals, and only the tickets could buy a moon member blood meals because it meant the moon was a royal servant. My mother decided to use some of it to see if she could prolong her life a bit longer, so she could guide me through the changes when my wolf comes. I couldn't count on her succeeding, but I appreciated her effort. 2 weeks later, after the dinner service, I decided to go to the moon park in town to relax with some leftover dessert. The moons were happy I was working for Adam because the meals were delicious, and Sandy and Kate cooked in high quantities, which left a lot for us to share. The moon workers weren't much, so it was enough in small portions. I sat on the bench in the desolate and dead park and looked up at the full moon. There was a time the pack was green, and it flourished, but now it was a dead wasteland scorched by war and magic. The air was filled with ash, but it was all the moons were allowed. We had to make do at that park. "You shouldn't be out here alone," I heard Prince Adam's voice, and I jumped. I behaved like someone that was caught red-handed. I kept my face to the ground out of fear. "Good evening, Your Highness," I greeted him, wondering what he was doing at the moon pack. "You shouldn't be here, Your Highness. The air is not suitable for your health," I warned, remembering what I was told about his well-being and my life. "Neither should you," he said, sounding indifferent. "Are you waiting for your boyfriend?" he asked. And I shook my head. "No, Your Highness, I have none," I said. And he was silent a bit. "I want to eat, and I need my food taster to taste them for me before I eat them," he said, and I nodded, ready to follow him. As he walked, I walked behind him. He tried to walk next to me, but I always lagged a bit so that I fall behind. "You do not need to walk behind me, Desiree," he said. "I will get into trouble, Your Highness. I am just trying to survive here," I said to him with a pleading voice. "You won't get into trouble if I was the one that ordered you to do it," he assured me. But I knew that was far from the truth. His command does not override his father's or the council. If I am found guilty of a crime, I will be punished regardless of who put me up to it. "Do you have a wolf yet?" he asked me. "No, Your Highness. I am only 17, I replied. "That explains it," he said, and began to laugh. "And here I was thinking," he said, and then paused. "Never mind," and he continued to walk. His behavior was strange, but I chose to ignore it. I wasn't going to ask any questions that would get me in trouble. "When is your 18th birthday?" he asked. "June 26, I replied, and he nodded. "I will keep that in mind," he said, and my heart begged him not to. We got to the food truck, and to my surprise, it was a moon food truck. It looked run down, but the crescent moon painted on the side of the truck indicated it was owned by a moon. Prince Adam pulled his hood to hide his face and wore a moon badge. He ordered me to act normal. He didn't want anyone to know who he was, so I had to override my better judgment and treat him as a moon. "Good evening. May we have?" I asked, and waited for Adam to link me and tell me what he wanted. "Your Tuesday specials, please," I asked, not knowing what that was. "Desiree." "How are you doing?" the food seller said, and I realized it was Michiel, our nosy neighbor. He and his wife were full of it. How wondered why I never knew they sold food for a living. "I heard you work for Bloods now," he said with a bit of disdain. "Your father and grandfather will be rolling in their graves right now," he said, and I wanted him to shut up. "You shouldn't be working for the people that killed your grandfather and absorbed his pack and took over his land and country. All of this is rightfully your mother's, you know, but those thieves took it all. They can't even keep the ash away with their science. Your grandfather kept the ash away and made our country flourish. Look at what they have done to all his hard work. The ash is coming. They might think they are safe, but it will consume this country. Let's see where they would run to then. They do not deserve your loyalty, Desiree. You should be ashamed of yourself, he said, and I needed him to shut up. Tuesday special, please, I asked him, a bit short and angry. Meow, his mate, Tende said. A bit feisty this evening, she said, and I said hello to her and repeated what I wanted. They finally brought the Tuesday specials, which were rice and beans with fried chicken. Adam requested that they served 2 servings in one spot. We sat side by side at the table by the food truck, and he kept his hoodie on. He opened the food and smiled. Bon appetit, he said, and my eyes grew wide. Come on, Desiree. Let's eat as friends, he said, and I didn't know how to feel about this, but I joined in. He put a spoonful in his mouth and closed his eyes to savor the taste. There is nothing better than this, he said, and I was shocked. You come here often? I asked him, and he nodded with a grin. He looked very handsome, and my heart jumped. Don't you like the food? He asked me, and I nodded, claiming it was okay. So your grandfather was the alpha? He asked, sounding a bit sorry for me, and I nodded. Sorry for your loss, he said, and I nodded. That was a long time ago. I am over it. I told him. They aren't, he said, sounding a bit sad. How come you are Dawson? I thought the alpha was Johnson, he asked, and I shook my head. He was my mother's father. My father was his beta, I said. And he nodded with realization. Could your mother do magic? He asked quietly, and I shook my head. It is a dormant gene in her bloodline, I replied, and he nodded. I heard my father say something like that, he replied, and I smiled. I hope this isn't awkward, he asked me, and didn't know how to respond. It is a bit. I mean, I am a moon. You are the prince and the king heir, I said, pointing out the issue. And he smiled. He sat too close to me for comfort, and I did not know what to do about it. I was afraid that someone might see us and report, but he was relaxed and confident. The food was nice, but I was too worried to enjoy it. He thanked me for the company and left. The moment he left me, I relaxed. It was as if I had held my breath throughout. I became very worried and scared. I hoped for my sake that no one saw us together. I returned to the pack house. Instead of sleeping in the blood quarters, I went to the service quarters that belonged to the moons. I did not want to go to the blood quarters. I woke up early the next day and went to wait for the chefs in the kitchen. The instant they finished, we took the food to Adam's apartment. As soon as the servers left, he smiled at me and asked me to sit, but I refused. Please, Your Highness, I do not want to get into trouble, I said, very afraid. He was too nice for comfort. He stood up and locked the door and then asked me to sit. I know you haven't eaten yet. Once we are done, you can leave. I promise no funny business, he said, and I reluctantly sat on the table. I dished the food, and he dished his. I tried to stop him, but he smiled. No one is here, Desiree. You do not need to taste my food, he assured me, but I insisted. He obliged me and let me eat the food first. After 15 minutes, he dug in. We had some small talk over breakfast, and when he finished, I started packing up the dishes and leftovers. He smiled at me and retired to his room. I unlocked the door and called the Omega to clear the dishes. As usual, I took the leftovers to the moon service quarters. I wasn't comfortable with Adam's behavior towards me, especially after reading Alice's journal. I hoped for my sake that the guy doesn't fancy me because that would put me in a lot of trouble. I just wanted to keep my head on my neck, and Adam was making it difficult. I went to Aunt Margaret's room to rest a bit. I had a good time with you last night. We'll like to do that often if you don't mind. The rice and beans were killing. I heard Adam's voices in my head through the mind link, and I shook. His voice stirred up all kinds of forbidden emotions in me that I knew I needed to be careful. He was the next king, he was a blood, and he was engaged. It was a big, red light. 2 weeks later, Adam gave me a day off, which I decided to spend at the Moon Park and relax. As horrible as the place may seem, it held some precious memories of me and my parents. Memories I was doing all that I could to hold on to and never let go. On my way out of the gate, I saw a recruitment queue that had the Bloods lined up separately from the Moons. The sign read, "Engineers needed." I knew King Kingston had been trying to build weapons and technology that could change the fate of our environment. He had spent a lot and risked a lot, but the results so far had been underwhelming. The Moons knew it would be difficult for him to succeed because we lived in a magic world, and in our world, magic and science went together. There was no way his machines and inventions could work without magic powering them or helping them to operate. Alpha Kingston was trying hard to beat this oddity because witches were no longer at our disposal. After reading my mother's letters, I understood why. Because the witches were no longer at our disposal, we had to depend heavily on science to survive. Some of the attempts were successful, but others weren't. Werewolves did not have magic, except for certain bloodlines like my mother's. My mother's family had very selective magic. It had skipped my mother, and she hoped I would inherit it. It was the only magic available to the Moons. And just like the name of our pack implies, the magic was amplified or dampened by the Moon. I learned the Bloods had magic once, but it was dark. So they found a way to make it dormant until it was expelled. Although people mocked King Kingston when he said he would build a megacity on our lands when they took over. He had surprised everyone and succeeded. My mother told me the Bloods attacked us because our land was the only place that wasn't scorched and covered with the ash atmosphere. This was possible because of the Moon magic wielded by my grandfather, the alpha of the Moon pack. Although he wasn't as strong as the one before him, he was strong enough to keep the ash at bay, which made the sunshine and the crops grow. The fact that our land wasn't scorched made it a target. We had withstood and won so many attacks from packs that tried to take over our lands that it weakened our defenses and made us vulnerable. When the Bloods attacked us, we weren't at our best capacity. And that was why they won. But King Kingston was wise enough to kill all the Moons that could rise against him to keep the Moons subdued. What was happening was the result of his actions. Most of the pack members had forgotten their strength. After watching the engineers line up at the Greater Gate to get a tally and sit for the engineers' exams, I walked away. When I got to the park, I became sad. No matter how strong technology was, it couldn't compete with magic. The ash was slowly spreading over our lands, and the once green earth in some places had turned gray and desolate because the sun could not shine upon it. The wicked Blood members had moved the Moon members to the damaged parts of the land and taken over the fertile and clean parts. I wondered why they didn't just kill us all. The ash and poor nutrition was the reason why most Moon members had been falling ill and dying lately. It is also the cause of my mother's illness. I sat at the bench and wished I could speed the hands of time, get my wolf and see maybe I would inherit the Moon magic so I could use it to liberate my people and heal our lands. I sat on the bench and just stared at the rusted contraption that looked like a swing, but didn't run because there was no magic to power it. Someone came to sit next to me, and to my surprise, it was Adam. I wanted to gasp, but I held my peace. "Calm down, Desiree. I gave you the day off so we could hang out," he said, laughing. He was wearing a gray hoodie this time around, and it was over his head. "Please, Your Highness. You will get me in trouble. If anyone sees you here with me, I could lose my life," I pointed out. "Don't worry, Desiree. No one would see us," he said. "The ash can *** your system," I said, reminding him of the difference in the atmosphere. He took a deep breath and sighed. "Desiree, one thing the Bloods never tell Moons is that our territory was scorched beyond recognition before we heard of the Moonlands and decided to take it over so we could survive. I had breathed ash air for 15 years before we came to conquer this place. The richness of the lands and cleanliness of the air was what made the Bloods determined to win the pack war. He said and kept silent. He had passed his message and made his point. We sat on the bench, apart from each other, and admired the scenery quietly. After an hour, Adam got up, said goodbye, and left. I wanted to visit my mother, and a part of me had come to that park hoping she might come to eat there. But I did not see her, and I did not want to see Rob. I knew I would have to visit her eventually. I resumed work the next day, and I noticed a lot of preparations were going on. I had learned that King Kingston was throwing an engagement party for his son Adam and his beta's daughter, Lola. The work was much, and we were not allowed to rest. I had to pick up some chores and serve Adam at the same time. Lola was with him throughout, beaming. Soon her friends came to get her ready for the party. I was leaving with the food when Adam spoke to me. "Desiree, look nice at the party," he ordered. And I knew that wouldn't be wise. "Your Highness, please, I do not want to get into trouble here. I will be wearing my uniform," I told him, and he shook his head. "All the workers would be wearing their clothes and dressed nice," he said to me, and I shook my head. "They are all Bloods. I am the only royal staff that is a moon, and it is only level 8, 9, and 10 staff that are allowed to attend. The rest of the staff would be serving. I know you have promoted me, but I do not want to annoy anyone," I pleaded, and he shook his head. "What nonsense! I will send you something to wear. You better look nice. My food taster cannot look shabby at my party," he said, and I was afraid I could not argue with him, but I knew I would get in trouble. "I will send you something in the shade of blue to make you feel better," he said, and my stomach churned because I did not know what kind of dress he would be sending. "Go and get ready. I will send the clothes to your room, and my best friend Kyle will come and get you," he said. "Please send it to the lower service quarters," I told him, and he frowned. "What are you doing in that place?" "I told them to give you a better room fit for level 10 staff," he said, and I shook my head. "They did, Your Highness. It is a beautiful room." I lied because it was a blood level 6 room that I was given. "It is just that I spend most of my time in the lower service quarters with my kind," I tried to explain. "What do you mean by your kind?" he asked, a bit angry, and I got scared. I did not want to reply, so I did not annoy him any more than I already had, but I had to. "I do not want to break any rules or get in trouble. No matter how high you promote me, Your Highness, I am still a moon, and moons are regarded as lesser wolves. I do not want to offend anyone, so I spend most of my free hours in the lower service quarters and retire to sleep in the blood quarters," I said, and his eyes widened. "You mean there is a blood quarter? I thought the quarters were according to levels. What about the level 9 and 10 moons? Where do they stay?" he asked me, and I realized I had just given him the information he wasn't supposed to have. I was already in it. I couldn't back down now. "They stay in the lower service quarters, where all the moons stay," I said. And he nodded. "I will check the place out myself," he said, and I shook my head. "Please, Your Highness, don't go there. Please don't," I begged, knowing I will be blamed for this. I was the only moon he was interacting with, and if he did not know what was going on all these years, that meant he had never visited the place. "Very well, Desiree. I understand your fears. I will have them fix up the lower service quarters and move you back to the place," he said, and I thanked him. The place needed renovation. I just hoped he had the power to pull off that kind of stunt. Adam kept his word and sent the dress to my Aunt Margaret. My aunt wasn't happy at all. I could see it in her eyes. Most moons weren't happy, and I knew it wasn't jealousy because they loved me a lot. "You need to be careful, Desiree. You are a beautiful moon. Beautiful moons don't last here," one of the moon girls said to me, and she had fear in her eyes. When they left, I sat with Aunt Margaret while she dressed me up for the event. "Honestly, I can dress by myself," I complained to her, and she sadly shook her head. "Prince Adam insisted that I make sure you look nice," she said, and her hands began to shake as she combed my hair. I touched her hand on my head and asked her why. She broke down completely. "I promised Tiffany I would protect you, Desiree, but how can I protect you from the prince?" she said and began to weep. "That young man is going to draw too much attention to you, and that only means certain hardship or death for a moon here. Why didn't you decline nicely?" She asked me in tears, and I understood her. I did. And when he insisted, I wanted to go as a worker in my work clothes. I tried. Honestly, Auntie, I wish he would send word and tell me not to bother. I will be delighted. If I defy him and not go, I will be punished. If I go, I might be punished. I do not have a choice, I told her, and she nodded and lifted my face with her hand so I could see her. No matter how nice he is, do not forget that he is a blood and you are a moon. Keep your head down at all times. Be timid and weak and act like a servant. Do not get comfortable. Desiree, do not forget who you are, she advised me, and I nodded. Adam's best friend and future beta Kyle came to the lower service quarters to get me. I learned he was from a Delta family, but would be beta because he was the second strongest of Adam's generation. He was as easygoing as Adam, but I kept to my aunt's advice. I kept my head down throughout our walk to the banquet hall. "Moon," he said to me, and I kept my head down. "You will be sitting at our table," he said to prepare my mind. As we walked, I heard people murmuring and asking who I was. Adam had sent me a beautiful royal blue laced gown. It was revealing and concealing at the same time. The gown was long with a slit that went up to my thighs, revealing my long legs. He complimented it with a silver slipper, and the heels flattered my feet. My aunt held my hair in a ponytail, revealing my face. Everyone at the moon quarter said I looked like a goddess. And the truth was we weren't trying to look good, but I couldn't fault nature for making me beautiful. I just had to find a way that I don't draw too much attention to myself. The murmuring was much, and I wanted to die. I did not allow Kyle to intertwine his hands with mine, and I kept my head bowed at all times. When we got to the table, I refused to sit. I knew the heels would hurt, but I stood like the other moon servants at the banquet and curtsied to anyone passing without looking at their faces. "Desiree, you are a guest tonight," I heard Kyle say. "Yes, but I am still a moon. I must remain standing until all the bloods are seated," I told him, and he understood my position. 30 minutes later, King Kingston and his son entered the hall. While the bloods genuflected in reverence, the moons knelt, and so I had to kneel too. Kyle tried to stop me, but I wouldn't want to come across as an arrogant servant, so I knelt on the hard floor like the other moons. "You may all be seated," I heard the king say, and I waited for the moons to sit before I sat. The moment I sat down, a blood worker approached our table. "You are not allowed to sit here, Moon. You need to go to sit with your kind," he said to me in a very condescending tone and pointed to a bare table where the moon guests were allowed to sit. Aunt Margaret was there, and that was motivation enough. Keeping my head bowed and avoiding eye contact with the blood, I stood up, and Kyle held my hand. "She is Prince Adam's guest, and he instructed she sits at this table with me," Kyle said, and the blood did not speak again. "Please, Beta, allow me to sit with my kind," I pleaded. "I will taste his food and return to my seat," I explained. And he did not agree, but when he noticed I was trembling, he let me go. I went to sit with my aunt quickly and did not look up until I was sitting at her table. "Why didn't you tell me you were coming?" I asked her, and she smiled at me. "I am a level 10 worker after all. Wasn't going to honor the invite, but I couldn't leave you here all by yourself," she said and winked at me, and I was grateful for her kindness. "We are here to celebrate the engagement of our future king, Adam Kingston, to his chosen mate, Lola Green," a man said, holding up a champagne glass. Everyone cheered and clapped, and Adam sat next to Lola, looking bored and uncomfortable. The man said a long, boring speech, and everyone applauded. It was time to eat. "Come taste my meals. I heard Adam say in my head, and I swallowed hard. How did he expect me to walk through the sitting crowd to the high table, where his father and all the important people were, and taste his food, looking like I did? I knew I could not disobey, so I stood up, my knees shaking, and began to walk towards the high table. People murmured, and I knew I would get into trouble for this. When I got to the high table, I knelt and remained silent. "Taste my food," Adam said out loud, but I did not stand up. I waited for the king to tell me it was okay for me to get that close to him. "How old are you, Moon?" I heard King Kingston ask me. 17. "Your Majesty," I replied. "I see. What is your name?" he asked. "Desiree Dawson." "Your Majesty," I replied. "I see. Are you Tiffany Dawson's daughter?" He asked me. "Yes, Your Majesty," I replied. He said. "Do you have magic?" he asked, and everyone began to murmur. "No, Your Majesty. It is not in my bloodline," I quickly responded. "It died with my grandfather," I solidified, and he did not answer. "Who gave you the permission to dress like that?" An angry woman asked me. I knew she was angry. By the sound of her voice, I could not look up, so I did not know who she was. "I did," Adam quickly responded, "and it is none of your business. You have no right to question my staff or speak when the king is speaking," I heard him say, and the woman apologized. I remained on my knees, with my head bowed, filled with fear. "You may do as your master wishes," King Kingston finally said. "Permission to look up and be merry is granted," he said, and I stood up but kept my head bowed, never looking at anyone on the table. I served Adam's meals and tasted his food and drink. A moon brought me a chair to sit close to Adam, and King Kingston permitted me to sit down. "Won't you taste my food too?" Lola asked me, sounding annoyed. "She doesn't work for you, Lola," Adam scolded her, and she smiled. "I am your mate, and thus she serves me too," Lola said, and Adam seemed like he had enough. He lifted his glass and stood to speak immediately. I tried to taste her food, but he stopped me, and everyone saw it. I bowed my head apologizing and sat where I was. I noticed the moons knelt when he stood up, so I moved my chair and knelt. Adam told me to stand up through the mind link, but I refused. I would do everything the moons did. "I am not happy about this match, nor am I in support of it," he stated, and many people gasped. "I just want to state that Lola and I are not in love but are being forced into this union. If I find my mate, I will not proceed with this union," he said and sat down. I sat back down, and I heard his father scolding him. Lola was crying, and everything was a mess. I also noticed other blood ladies smiling. I guess they were hopeful. Adam paid me too much attention during the party, and I was scared all through. The moment it was over, I left in a hurry and retired to Aunt Margaret's room in the lower service quarters. I could not go to the blood quarters because I was asked to stay away for that night. They were having a party and I was not invited. The moment I entered my aunt's room, Adam summoned me to his room. "Don't change your clothes," he ordered, and I felt weird. I got to his room, and he offered me a drink. "I see you did not enjoy yourself tonight." And I went on my knees immediately. "Please, Your Highness, you need to stop being nice to me. We are not equals. I am trying to keep my job and help my mother. All this will draw unnecessary attention to me. I do not want to be on the receiving end. Please." I pleaded because he was getting careless. "I cannot do that," he said to me, and I looked at him. He helped me up, pulled me close. He moved close gently, and I felt a flutter in my chest. I could choose to step back or stay, and no words of command ever crossed his lips. I just stood there, feeling a warmth that was never meant for me. "I can't, Desiree, and you will understand why when you turn 18. I snuck back to my room and lay on my bed. Under normal circumstances, I should be happy, but I was in a big mess. Adam kissed me. He showed me some affection on the night he was officially engaged to a cruel words. How will I survive this? I opened Alice's journal to read more. I needed to know what happened to her. I browsed through the pages and settled on one closer to the beginning. I met Donovan at the moon park today. I do not know how this mate thing works, but I knew I had to reject him because he is a blood. He did not take the rejection well, and he has refused to accept. I am very worried because this could get me in trouble. Apart from the mate bond, I like him, but my moon status forbids me from it. I have to let go. A lot of people are beginning to suspect. I do not want to get in trouble. But as things are, I might. And as much as Donovan claims to care, he will not protect me when the time comes. I wish I could run away, but my father told me that the witch wars have scorched the earth, and this is the best place to be right now. I put down the book, unable to continue reading, and I began to fear for my life. I decided I would ask for a demotion or transfer in the morning. I could not allow myself to be used and discarded like Alice. Rob came to visit the next day. I saw it coming because payday was yesterday. I stood outside the greater gate to receive him, and he looked very angry. Why will you spend all your earnings, Desiree? Don't you care about your mother's welfare? He asked me, and I smiled. My mother's welfare is your duty. Not mine, I responded, and he was mad. I am not a fool or a slave, Rob. You thought you could sign me up to work so you can collect my wages. If you want money, work for it. I do not owe you or my mother anything, I said to him, and he slapped me. You ungrateful little cruel words, he said. And I began to laugh. I could taste blood in my mouth, but his frustration was satisfying. I will not see you again, Rob. Find someone else to dupe. My birthday is in 3 months, Rob, the clock is ticking, I said, and walked away from him. I was so happy and my spirit was lifted. His anger was so satisfying that I couldn't stop laughing. I served Adam's food, maintaining my distance, and I did not relax around him as I did before. Are you mad about last night? He asked me through the mind link, and I shook my head. He looked at me and smiled. I want to be demoted, Your Highness. I quickly requested, and he looked at me in shock. Is it because of last night? He asked me, and I shook my head. I was so nervous I wanted to vomit. I cannot demote you. Destiny has tied my hands there. I do not intend to throw the moon goddess's gift away without a fight. He said to me, and I did not understand his rambles. I did not understand what he was talking about. I have asked them to renovate the lower service quarters. It will be ready in 2 weeks. You will be given a beautiful room there so you do not have to live among the bloods, he said, and stepped to me. There are things that even I cannot explain, Desiree, but I won't let go without a fight, he said to me and went to sit on the table. Let us eat, he ordered, and I served the food and we ate. He gave me the rest of the day off and made me promise to show him around the moon territory. I was reluctant, but I had no choice. I agreed, and we decided to meet at the park. Adam waited for me at the park. I was surprised to see that he had arrived at the park before me. I joined him, and we began to walk. I must commend your grandfather for keeping the ash away, he said, as we walked. I did not know how to feel about his words, but I kept it to myself. The witch wars claimed my mother's life, and I think that was why my father became desperate to move us to safety. It is sad that for us to be safe, others had to suffer, he said, and we stopped at an alley. I wondered why we stopped there. Adam stepped into my personal space, his gaze burning with an intensity that seemed to lock my very soul. In the narrow hallway, the air crackled with an unspoken connection. A magnetic pull that I couldn't ignore even if I wanted to. Your scent is divine, Desiree, he said, taking in my scent and whispering to my ears without touching me. I do not understand why the bloods and moons cannot live as one. I will change that in my time for your sake. he promised me, and I was scared because he was too close for comfort. Please let me kiss you, he pleaded, and I was confused. Honestly, the guy was hot, what every woman would want. Under normal circumstances, it would be hell yeah from me. But this wasn't a normal circumstance and I needed to stay alive. I do not want trouble, Your Highness. You are engaged and I am a moon, I said to him, and his eyes flashed jet black. I do not care about that, Desiree, he said, in a deeper, hard voice. It was his wolf, and I became scared. My life. I tried to protest. Kiss me, Desiree, so I can regain my sanity. And for a minute, I almost forgot myself. It felt so right that I began to melt in his arms. This was a bad situation. I finally broke the kiss, panting, and Adam smiled broadly and pulled me close. We were made for each other, Desiree. Let us be together. I do not know if I will be able to control myself any longer, he confessed, and tears of fear began to roll down my cheeks. You are going to get me killed, Your Highness, was all I could manage, and he kissed me passionately. Give me time. I will try to find a way for us to be together, he said, and I shook my head. I do not want to be with you, I protested. I just want to work and earn money so I can take care of my dying mother. I don't, I said. And he held me and frowned. Dying mother? He asked, and I nodded and began to cry. Yes, Your Highness. My mother has cancer caused by the ash, and she is dying, I confessed. What about medical treatments available? A lot of people have been able to beat the ash cancer, he said, and I laughed, wiping away my tears. A lot of bloods, Your Highness, I corrected him. A lot of bloods have been able to beat cancer because they get all the best medical care. Moons can't afford them, and even if they could, our physicians don't have the best types of equipment for that, I said, and he shook his head. You mean the moon hospital is ill-equipped? He asked me, and I laughed. Go see for yourself, Your Highness. My people are dying, I said to him, and he bowed his head. My father has delegated a lot of responsibilities to me in the moon territory. I was reluctant to take them up, but I will. I will make sure the engineers build good medical devices for the moon hospital. Meanwhile, I will have a specialist attend to your mother, he said. And I didn't know how to feel about it. Don't worry, Desiree. It will not be traced to you. I will convince my father why we have to keep her alive, so she doesn't die with the magic of the moon, he explained. It won't work. The gift skipped my mother. It should have come with her wolf, I told him. And he smiled. My father doesn't know that part, and I do not think it is wise you tell anyone, he warned me, and I beamed at him. Good to see you smile, genuinely. Desiree, and please call me Adam, he said, and I shook my head. When we are alone, call me Adam. I will love to hear you call my name, he said. I showed him a couple of places, and we returned to the pack house separately. I stayed up all night with butterflies in my stomach. A part of me wanted him, but the other part advised me against it. I did not want to get in trouble, but he was so charming and so sweet. I couldn't help it. My heartbeat was different for the first time, and I knew I was in trouble. I couldn't stop thinking about Desiree. When she showed up in the blue gown I got her, I was able to appreciate the beauty the moon goddess had blessed me with. I couldn't help but decline the engagement. Although she was a moon, I was going to fight for her with everything that I had. Her vanilla fragrance was what drew me to the back of the club where Nixon was beating her up. I had traced residues of her scent for a while during my secret walks to the moon community, until I finally found her that night. I did not care that my fated mate was a moon. I was grateful for her. Desiree was a goddess. And those turquoise eyes pierced my soul. It took a lot of discipline not to claim her. I thought she was rejecting the bond at first when she was indifferent towards me. But when I found out she wasn't of age yet, I understood why. When I saw her at the cafeteria, I couldn't let my mate serve others. She was to be a princess and future queen. And that was why I moved her to my side so I could be close to her and protect her. I wasn't happy she had come to work in the blood pack house, but I later found out that someone else had signed her up for it. I was glad to see her. I had controlled myself and tried to hide my feelings, but I couldn't anymore. If I didn't kiss Desiree that night, I would have gone insane. Seeing her in that dress made me want to do all kinds of unspeakable things to her, but I had to control myself, and I hated it. I knew the kiss was sudden, and I knew it shocked her, but I honestly had no other option. I wanted my mate. I needed her, but I had to be wise about it, so I do not get her in trouble. Taking her on that walk was necessary. I wanted to profess my love to her, but I knew it would be wrong and sudden. I knew I should not have kissed her the way I did. But I had to. That vanilla just kept calling me, and it was driving me nuts. Apart from her scent, her personality was the perfect match for me. Desiree was all I wanted in a mate. Even if we weren't fated, I would still fall in love with her. I wished I could run away with her, and that would have been an option if she hadn't told me of her sick mother. Running away with Desiree would be selfish, and because of that, I needed to make being together with her possible, so that when she turned 18, I could have her and claim her as my mate. Kissing Desiree had become a habit for me. I waited for her to come with the food in the morning so I could get my fill for her. I was addicted, and I saw her relax gradually, which was a good sign, but she never asked for anything, and we never went beyond kissing. 2 months had passed since the engagement party, and my father finally called me to his chambers for a family meeting. It meant we would be eating together, and I wouldn't see Desiree that night. I was very sad and unhappy about it. My wolf Christophe was restless about it, and I knew he wouldn't give me peace until we saw our mate. I entered my father's chambers and found Lola and her parents there, along with my best friend, Kyle, and the future beta of the pack. "Come in, son," my father said with a jolly voice. "I believe we should eat dinner together as a family," he said. And I got irritated because his beta wasn't part of our family. Neither was Lola and her mother and Kyle. I sat at the table, and Lola sat next to me. She tried to intertwine her fingers with mine, and I pulled my hands away quickly. I couldn't pretend around her anymore. I have always found her repulsive, and it had nothing to do with Desiree. She had been repulsive before I found Desire. It had a lot to do with her bad attitude and arrogance. I couldn't stand her, and I didn't think it would be fair on the packs to give them a Luna and Queen like Lola. She was a big no. My father noticed my behavior towards her, and I was sure her parents noticed it too. I honestly didn't care. I didn't want to be saddled with the girl. She was a handful, and I couldn't deal with her. "Why are you that way towards your mate, Adam?" my father asked, and I looked at him boldly. "She is not my mate, and I have had enough of all this nonsense. I do not need you to choose a mate for me, father. I will choose one for myself," I told him, and everyone was silent. "We have discussed this, Adam," my father said, surprised. "You are alpha and king of this country, father, but you have no right to force me to claim anyone. I am not interested in Lola, and it seems like I haven't spoken loud enough," I said. "We have discussed this. Lola is Beta Green's daughter. There will be no better match for you out there because this is the best part of the world right now. The ash has taken over everything. You cannot get a mate from other packs. So if you haven't found a mate among the blood pack members yet, it simply means you have to choose one here," my father explained, and I smiled. "The moons are there," I said, "and they have beautiful and respectful women too," I said. And he banged the table. "Preposterous," he yelled. "Over my dead body, would we have a moon, Luna, and Queen? But we forget. It is their lands, and we are enjoying the benefits of their hard work," I pointed out. "It is our land now, and they are enjoying our charity. I hope you aren't getting any ideas because of that attractive food taster of yours," my father asked, and I frowned. I rejected Lola even before I had a female taster. "This has nothing to do with her," I told my father. "Liar," Lola said in tears. "Shut up, Lola," Beta Green warned his daughter. "How dare you speak to the future king in that tone?" he asked, and Kyle smiled. I see why my friend doesn't want you, Kyle said with a smirk, and she began to cry. He spends a lot of time with that moon girl, Lola said, crying. He locks the door when she takes his food to him, she said, and my father was shocked, and he looked at me. The stupid girl had tried the door and found it locked. I needed to think quickly. Kyle came to my aid immediately. That is because we do not want you disturbing our meals. I am the one that locked the door, Kyle said, and I was relieved. I linked him to thank him, and he told me we would need to talk later. Father, I do not want Lola, I said point blank. Let us stop all the pretense. I rather remain mateless than being with someone like her. She is a handful, and I can't deal with her nonsense. I want someone like my mother, and this girl is far from it. I told him, and my father bowed his head. Give her time, son. I am sure Beta Green's mate would work on her daughter, he said, and I shook my head. I do not want her, father, and I will not claim her. No one chose for you. Please do not choose for me, I said, and remained silent. After the meal, the Greens and Kyle left, and my father and I stayed indoors. I do not like the fact that you are spending time with that moon girl. You are my son and shouldn't be seen with the help. She is beautiful and she might tickle your fancy once in a while. You can play with her if you like, but do not get ideas and do not get caught with her. I have moon mistresses too. They are beautiful women, but no one knows. You are being careless, my father said, and my heart broke. I noticed you have been doing a lot for the moons lately. Does it have anything to do with that girl? He asked. And I shook my head. He studied me for a while and then smiled at me. I left his room and returned to mine. I tossed and turned throughout, and when I could not sleep, I linked Desiree, and she responded. Where are you? I asked her. In my room at the moon quarters, she replied, a bit sleepy, and I broke off the link. I snuck out of our quarters and went to the moon quarters. I had been there a couple of times during the renovation, and I knew exactly where Desiree's room was because I had made it for her. I knocked lightly, and she let me in. Adam, you will get me in trouble, she said to me, complaining. Shh, I said, and pulled her close to my chest. I wrapped myself in her scent, and Christoph calmed down. I can't wait for you to turn 18, Desire, I said, and she sighed. She was used to me by now, so it was much easier. I locked the door, and we cuddled to sleep. I had the best sleep of my life with her in my arms. How could my father want to deprive me of this peace? I knew I needed to find a way for us to be together. I snuck out of her room in the early hours of the morning and went on a run with my wolf. I would pretend like I stayed out all night so no one would suspect I had been in Desiree's room. I knew I would need to come clean to Kyle soon, but not yet. 6 months had passed, and I was a lot comfortable around Adam now. We snuck around a lot. It bothered me, but as long as he wasn't trying to sleep with me, I was okay. Although I wouldn't lie about the sexual tension between us, we kept it under control. He often came to hold me at night, and I looked forward to it. I knew what I was doing was dangerous, and Alice's journal explained the repercussions to me, but I was falling fast. My 18th birthday was in a month, and I couldn't wait. I tried to keep my head down. People had started acting funny towards me, but it didn't bother me. I was taken off all physical tasks, and I knew some people began to suspect that I might be sleeping with the prince. Aunt Margaret called me into her room one evening to ask me intimate questions. Desiree, are you sleeping with Prince Adam? She asked me with a stern look on her face, and I shook my head. Are you sure? Because you reek of him, and people are spreading rumors about you two, she said, looking worried and concerned. I am still a virgin, Auntie, I told her, and I saw her relax a bit. This is a bad situation for you. If these rumors spread to the king's ears that you are sleeping with his son, he could have you executed, she said. And there it was for the first time, a solid confirmation that Alice's journal was true, and what Adam and I were doing could lead to our deaths. But I am not sleeping with him. You can check me, I said close to tears, and she nodded. I do not know what is going on, but plead with Prince Adam to reduce the affection and attention he is showing you. If he wants you to be safe, he needs to send you back to the kitchen and get a new taster. I know he is fond of you, but his affection might get you killed, she said with tears in her eyes. I have told him. I pleaded with him the morning after his engagement party and refused. I honestly do not know what to do, I cried to her, and she touched my head. What I am about to tell you might seem wicked and cruel, but listen, Desiree, when your mother finally passes away, promise you will leave this place, she said, and tears came to my eyes because my mother was now on her deathbed. Her death was inevitable. We didn't know precisely how long it would take, but we knew she would die eventually. Adam had helped her, but she had received the help a bit too late. All they were doing was prolonging her time based on her request. I wiped away my tears and nodded. That evening, I wasn't my happy self in the kitchen. Sandy and Kate tried to cheer me up, but I couldn't. What Aunt Maigret had told me was scary. I intended to plead with Adam to demote me so I could last a bit longer there. A new set of Omegas came to get his food, and when I asked them what happened to the old set, they said they had been promoted. They arranged the food on the dining table in Adam's apartment and left. Adam came out of the room. He smiled at me and came to hold me to his chest. He took in my scent, and I tried to break away. What is wrong, Desiree? He asked me gently. People are beginning to suspect. My aunt told me that if the king should hear of this, I can be executed, I said, tears falling down my eyes. Please send me back to the kitchen. I do not want trouble, I pleaded. But I knew my pleas would fall on deaf ears because Adam used that opportunity to hold me close and kiss me passionately. My treacherous body responded. I won't let anything happen to you, Desiree, he promised. You can't protect me from your father, I pointed out, and he paused for a while. If I have to, Desiree, I will, he promised me with conviction in his eyes, and he went to lock the door. I served his food and wanted to taste it first, but he insisted we eat together. Adam was a stubborn man, and I knew he wouldn't let me do my work. So we ate the food together. Come close, he said to me after the meal, and I was about to argue with him when I felt a sharp pain in my stomach. I flinched, and then I saw Adam flinch, and I knew my life was over, holding the pain. I asked him if everything was okay. Kyle is coming. Open the door, he managed to say in pain. He held his tummy, and I wondered why I wasn't in as much pain as he was. I managed to open the door, and by the time I returned, Adam had passed out on the floor. I was in pain too, but I was afraid. I knelt by him and began to cry. Kyle entered, and I knew my life was over. Desiree, what happened? He asked, in a stern voice. He finished eating, and this happened, I said, and the pain was increasing. Did you not taste his food? He asked me, and I didn't know if I should lie, so I opted for the safest answer. I ate it, I said, holding my tummy. Kyle checked on Adam, and he was sweating literally. I can't get you out of this, Desiree, he said with concern in his eyes. Even if I tell you to leave, they will come for you because you are his food taster. You have to surrender to me now, and we will investigate this quietly, he said, and before he could complete his sentence, Lola entered with Nixon and screamed when she saw Adam on the floor. She began to hit me, asking me what I had done to him. Under normal circumstances, I would have defended myself, but I was a moon, and she was a blood and the daughter of the beta at that. Retaliating will mean certain death for me. To add to that, I was equally in pain, and my vision had become blurred. I slowly passed out. I woke up in a dark, dirty cell, and I remembered what had happened. And I began to cry. There was a possibility they didn't give me any treatment and had left me there to die. If that was the case, then I had hope because it meant Adam would be all right. An hour later, a guard came to get me in chains and dragged me to the throne room. There were a lot of people present. I saw Auntie Margaret standing in tears, and I knew I was in big trouble. I was thrown to the floor in front of the throne, where King Kingston sat with rage in his eyes. "Adam is my only child," he began. "I loved his mother so much, and he was all she left me to remember her by," he continued. "Usually the right thing to do was to wipe out the moons when we won the war, but I showed kindness by sparing your lives and allowing you to live in our midst. You now choose to do this to me," he said. And I cried because whatever they were thinking wasn't the case. I told my son he was stupid to hire you as his food taster, but he wouldn't listen. "You want to take revenge for what we did to your grandfather and father, right?" he asked, and I shook my head with my head bowed. "Answer your king," I heard someone say, and I cried. "No, your majesty. What you did is enough to make me claim your life, but I want you to suffer before you leave this world, Moon," he said with anger and pain in his voice. The air in the throne room was heavy with a silence more painful than any physical strike. King Kingston's gaze was a crushing weight, demanding answers for the darkness that had touched his son. Though I felt the same sudden weakness that had claimed Adam, I stood alone in the center of their suspicion. I realized then that a sacrifice was required to appease the crown, and my history made me the easiest target for their blame. "Why did you feed my son asterisk, asterisk?" he asked me, and I cried because I was afraid something had happened to Adam. "I swear by the moon, your majesty, that I didn't," I cried. "I ingested the same substance too," I added, and the whip came down on me again. But I no longer cared. As long as my consciousness still burned, I could endure. "You are the only moon staff that handles his food. Are you trying to implicate the Bloods?" someone asked me, and I shook my head. The whip came back down. "No, no," I said, crying out loud. "So who is going to take the blame now and why?" the voice asked, and I knew what had happened. A crime had been committed, and I was going to be the scapegoat. It had nothing to do with whether I was guilty or innocent. It had everything to do with the fact that someone had to pay for what had happened. If I were a Blood, there would have been an investigation. But the fact that I was a moon meant I would take the blame. "Me, your majesty. I am to be blamed," I said, and I didn't know what to say as the why. But I would give anything for the thrashing to stop. The moment I said it, the crowd went silent. "Take her back to her cell," I heard the king say, and they dragged me away. I woke up in the clinic hooked to some machines, and I saw Lola by my bedside wiping away her tears. I remembered what happened, and got up immediately. "Your Highness, you are okay," Lola said, and I saw Kyle. "Where is Desiree?" I linked him. "Not good. Your father wants to execute her for sending you, but they want her to suffer first. She has been locked up all night. The king judged her and condemned her this morning," he said, and I got up immediately. I started rushing out. Lola tried to hold me, but I pulled away forcefully. I did not appreciate her touching me. "Why didn't you protect her?" I linked Kyle. "I couldn't. You were unconscious, and Lola came in with Nixon and started beating her. Everything happened so fast." I clenched my fist at what he told me, and I promised to deal with Lola for touching Desiree. First, I needed to get her out of the mess. I rushed to my father Chambers, where he was with Beta Green. I was fuming with anger, but I kept it under control. I knew I had to be diplomatic, so I do not cost Desiree her life. "Son," he exclaimed with great joy, "how are you feeling? It wasn't long ago I left your bedside at the clinic. I left Lola to watch over you." "How are you now?" he asked, and I nodded with respect. "I am fine, father," I said, and he smiled. "Thank Goddess you are okay, your highness," Beta Green said, and I thanked him for his concern. "Whatever that moon must have mixed with your food. She is lucky you didn't die. I had planned a painful death for her," my father said, and that was my cue to do what I had come to do. I was side-ed, father, and you have not launched an investigation yet. I asked my father, and he frowned at me. Why will you say that, son? The culprit is behind bars, he said with confidence. We both know the moon didn't do this. She ate that asterisk too. Whatever it was, whoever did this is still out there and might do it again. I said to my father, and he shook his head. If she had done her job, this wouldn't have happened. She is to watch your meals closely, he argued, and I shook my head. I will launch an investigation if you won't, father. I told him. Feel free to do that after the moon's execution, he said, and I shook my head. She is my staff father. I protested. And I am king, he said, reminding me of my place. I nodded and bowed my head. I knew I needed to think of something fast. I still want her as my food taster, I asked, and my father looked at me, then raised an eyebrow. Then, perhaps the rumors we have been hearing are true. We heard that you have been dipping your hands in her cookie jar, my father said, and I was disgusted by his insinuation. That moon is innocent. I have never slept with her. She doesn't even want that kind of attention. She is just hard-working and diligent, I said, and he shook his head. Not diligent enough, since she was sloppy to get you side-ed, my father said, and I linked him to speak with me in private. My father excused his beta, and I knelt to beg him. Please don't kill an innocent girl. I can't have that on my conscience, please, I said, and he looked at me long and hard. I love you, son, but this must not repeat itself. I will let her go, but the next time this happens, I will execute her, he said, and I got up and thanked him. That girl is beautiful, Adam. Do not be taken by her beauty. Do not forget she is a moon and a descendant of the alpha of the moon pack. She and her kind are dangerous. You might be fond of her, but do not lose sight of the danger she stands for, he said, and I nodded. Try and spend some time with Lola. Hurry and solidify your bond so we can pick a date for your union and produce an heir, he said. And I nodded and walked away. I didn't want to argue with him on Lola's issue. I just wanted Desiree out of the mess. I wanted to go to the dungeon, but I decided against it because that would imply a lot. I had to be brave and return to my room. My heart was heavy, and I was worried sick for Desiree. I tried to link her, but there was no response. She needed medical care, and instead of that, she was locked up. What if it was a deadly asterisk? She would have died, and that was when it hit me. Kyle, I linked my friend. What was I shooed with? I asked him. A bacteria that causes extreme stomach upset was found in your pudding along with small traces of silver, not enough to kill. That was all the doctor divulged to me. You have to ask him the rest, Kyle said. And that was when I knew what had happened. The asterisk wasn't meant to kill me. It was meant for Desiree. It wasn't going to kill me or anyone, just land me in the hospital long enough to get Desiree in trouble. Who would want to do that, and why? I wondered until I got to my apartment. The moment I entered, I smelled Lola, and I was irritated. She had beat Desiree and handed her to the guards. She was the one that probably blew this thing out of proportion. Now, thanks to her, Desiree had suffered for nothing. You left the clinic in a hurry, so I decided to come here to wait for you when I heard you were with the king, she said. And I was fuming. What are you doing here, Lola? I asked her, and she looked hurt. To check on my mate, of course. I was afraid when I thought the moon cruel words had done something to you. I hope she gets what she deserves, she said with so much scorn. And what did she do to me? I asked Lola, and she frowned at me. She ed you, she replied, unsure if that was the correct answer. Get out of my room, Lola, I said to her. You are lucky. I am a gentleman, or I would have beaten you up for what you did to my worker. On no account should you ever lay your filthy hands on any of my workers again. I told Lola, and Lola looked at me in shock. So it is true, she said with tears in her eyes. You are sleeping with your help, she said, and I almost slapped her. Do not spread dirty rumors about that innocent girl, Lola. If I find out that any of those rumors came from you, I will not show you mercy. Even your father won't rescue you from my wrath. I promised her. And her eyes widened with fear. Get the hell out of my apartment now, I yelled using my alpha voice, and she shook and ran out. The instant she left, I looked at my room and sat on the couch, worried. How would I see Desiree? I wondered how I would be able to reach her. Away from prying eyes. I wish I hadn't fainted, but it all happened so fast. I needed the situation investigated. Later in the evening, my food came. I was eager to see Desiree. To my surprise, it was a blood worker. Where is my food taster? I asked her, and she was afraid to speak. She stood there for a while, and I linked the mistress Bianca. Where is my food taster? I asked, and the mistress answered me immediately. His Majesty has sent her to do yard work as a penance. She is to begin her duty tomorrow. She will serve you tomorrow, but she is also to do yard work between her work. Mistress Bianca told me, and I dismissed the blood that had come to taste my food. I was so angry that I punched the wall. Desiree wasn't fit for yard work. She was Luna material. Why would my father reduce her to that? Yard work wasn't safe for someone like her, especially at night because of the horny moon soldiers that guard the pack house. Kyle, I linked my best friend. Please help me keep an eye on Desiree and protect her. Father is punishing her with yard work, and I do not want anyone touching her, I told him. Okay, Adam, but what is the deal with this girl? You have never paid any girl this much attention before. I know she is beautiful, but don't you think what you were doing is dangerous? Remember what happened to Donovan's Alice, he said. She is innocent, and I want her to remain that way. That is all, I lied. And he agreed to help me. I felt useless and helpless. I tried to link Desiree again, but I wasn't getting through, and when I finally did, she refused to respond. I knew she was in shock. Christoph said she was in shock, and my heart broke. I knew people would be watching me, so I couldn't go to her that evening. I decided I would wait until morning when she brings my food. When they told me the king had pardoned me, I was happy. The enforcers escorted me to my room, where Auntie Margaret was waiting for me with a stern look on her face. And I wondered why. Come, let me attend to your wounds, she said. She helped me bathe and dressed up my wounds. They were healing, but the pain was still there. I felt Adam in my head. But I ignored him. You need to thank the goddess that he didn't die. Desiree, he was the one that got you out of that place, she said, and I began to sob. I didn't do it, Auntie, I cried, and she held me close. I know, little one. I know. Some people have started working against you, Desiree, and I know why, she said, and looked at me angrily. Why did you lie to me that you were not sleeping with Prince Adam? She asked, and my eyes opened wide from surprise. I am not. I swear, I argued, and Aunt Margaret shook her head. Don't lie to me, Desiree. Your room and bed, she said. And I froze. I had been caught, but I wasn't doing anything with him. I am not sleeping with him, Auntie, but he comes here too. I couldn't say, and she shook me. To do what, Desiree? She asked, and I began to cry. I tried to discourage him and push him away, but he refused, I said, and she shook me to answer her. He sleeps here at night, I confessed, he said. It helps his wolf calm down, I told her, and her eyes widened with fear and she stood up. Desiree, have you heard of Alice Crawford? She asked me, and I did not answer. That poor girl was killed because she was fated to Donovan, the Gamma's son, she said, and began to cry. I am going to have to send you far away from here. We would say you ran away, she said, and suddenly I became scared because I didn't want to leave. What about my mother? I asked her. When I tell her why, she would understand, and she would be grateful I did it. She said, and I wondered why. Aunt Margaret sat beside me and pulled me close. She hugged me and cried. I resumed work the next day, and Sandy and Kate were glad to see me. They were very sorry, and they said they were afraid because they were the ones that cooked the meal. I didn't say a word to them, but I kept an eye on what they were doing. I intended to insist that Adam demotes me. I did not want to have anything to do with his food again. When the Omegas came for the food, I handed it to them and kept an eye on them individually. They arranged the food on the table and left. Adam came out of the room the moment they left and tried to hold me. But I moved away. I served a bit of everything on my plate, and he sat to eat. And that was when I stopped him. Allow me to do my job, Your Highness. I am to eat this food and wait for 30 minutes before you eat it. Please let me do my work. If you had allowed me last time, we would have known that something was wrong with the food. I suggest we wait 45 minutes after I have eaten it before you eat it. I said in a formal voice, and Adam looked hurt, and I was silent. I ate the meal and turned on the timer. I also want today to be my last day as your food taster. Please kindly demote me or relieve me of my service, I said. He shook his head and tried to hold me. I stepped back. It was hard, but I stepped back. Desiree, please, he pleaded. My auntie knows you sleep in my room. People are after me, and I know what happened to the Crawford girl. Please, Your Highness. I am the last of my bloodline. I cannot die. The king would have executed me. I said with tears streaming down my face. Please, Desiree, he said. We can beat this, he said, coming close, and I stepped back until my back was against the wall. I tried to fight him off, and soon I lost the battle and began to melt away in his arms. The moment he pulled away, I began to cry. I knew I was trapped. He wasn't going to let me go, and I wasn't strong enough to say no. I will take you off food tasting duty, and you will handle my wardrobe henceforth. That will be safer for you. I only put you on food to avoid spending your money buying food. It was my way of making sure you are fed, Desiree. But since it has come to this, I will take you off food duty, he said. And my heart was lifted a bit. He held me close and kissed me some more. He breathed in my scent and nibbled my ears. Did they hurt you? He finally asked me, and I nodded. I saw him ball up his fist, and I felt his tension and rage. I am so sorry, Desiree. I will make everything right. I promise you. I have launched an investigation on the matter. I will clear your name, he promised me, and I nodded in tears, remembering what they had done to me. I refrained from giving him the details because I knew he wouldn't handle it well. He held my hands and touched me. Did the guards do anything to you? He asked me, and I shook my head because I knew what he was asking me. A lot of moon girls were usually taken advantage of by both blood and moon enforcers. It was a sport for them, and moon women were very attractive compared to the bloods. The current living condition had started affecting our looks, and I doubted if we would remain that way for long. Adam touched my hands and kissed them. Hang on for me, Desiree. We will be together, he promised, and I doubted if he would be able to keep that promise. What set us apart was strong and couldn't be defeated. I didn't want to gamble with my life, and I hoped he wouldn't because the only person that could get hurt in this mess was me. I stood up to leave, and Kyle entered. He looked at both of us with a serious question in his eyes, and that was when I knew why. Inside the quiet sanctuary of the room, time seemed to stretch beyond the reach of the outside world. Adam stepped closer, and for a moment the heavy burden of our titles vanished. There was a magnetic pull in the silence between us, an unspoken promise that defied the laws of our kind. In the warmth of his presence, I found a fleeting peace, a connection that was both our greatest comfort and our most dangerous secret. I began to adjust myself, and Kyle looked at Adam and raised his eyebrow. Words did not need to be spoken. He had figured it out. I didn't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing, but he had figured it out. I adjusted myself, trying to hold on to my dignity, and called the Omegas to come to get his food. I was about to leave when Adam spoke to me in the presence of Kyle. My father put you on yard work, but Kyle will watch over you. Please be careful, Desiree, and don't let anyone touch what is mine, he said with black wolfish eyes, and I nodded, unsure what I should do because Kyle was there. I looked at Kyle, who was still stunned. I began to pray he would not rat us out. 2 people knew now, one on his end and the other on mine. I prayed to the goddess that they could be trusted and won't sell us out. The scare of the stinging still lingered on my mind. I did not want any more trouble. I left quietly, hoping I was put together enough. Kyle was in shock, and I knew it. Desiree looked like it. Her eyes and lips looked like it, and I looked like it too, and I knew my scent was all over her. I had to hide my erection and calm myself down. I honestly didn't know what to do or how it would work, but I knew I would soon have to face my fears. You are going to get that girl killed, Kyle said the moment Desiree left, and I hoped she hadn't heard him. It took a lot to convince her to give me a chance. Are you sleeping with her? He asked me, and I shook my head. He narrowed his eyes, and I shook my head. She isn't ready. I won't take advantage of her like that, I told him, and he sighed. So all you are doing is making out? He asked, and I nodded. You weren't there yesterday morning when your father had her beaten and sentenced her to death, Kyle said, and I froze. Desiree didn't tell me that. My fist clenched, and I felt sad and angry at the same time. I see. She didn't tell you, Kyle said. Well, she was disciplined by enforcers, and that was because your father felt she didn't do her job. Imagine what he would do if he finds out you are crazy about the girl, he said, and my heart bled. I didn't know she had gone through that kind of trauma. I thought they just locked her up and questioned her. I honestly did not know she had gone through that kind of trauma. I realized why she flinched when I grabbed her. It must have been the wound she sustained. Kyle, please, you have to keep this between us for now, I told my friend, and he smiled. I don't think that would be easy. You both have each other's scent. People are not stupid, and besides, she is a beautiful girl. What are you going to do when it blows open, Adam, because it will? He said to me with his honest tone. And I sighed. As much as I kept telling Desiree that she would be mine, I didn't know how I would make it work. My father will not allow it. The moment he learns of it, he would visit his anger on her. There was little power I can exercise for now. As long as he was still alpha and king, his word was the law. I knew the best option was to stay away from Desiree until I had everything figured out. But I couldn't. Christoph couldn't, and I knew I was in a mess. You don't have it figured out, right? Kyle asked me, and I bowed my head in shame. Let her go, Adam, he said, and Christoph began to growl at him. Kyle was sorry for me because he knew why. You have to let her go so she can live. Which would you prefer? Love her to her death or break her heart and keep her alive? He asked, and neither was a good option. Please, Kyle, help me keep an eye on her for now. I have moved her to wardrobe arrangement so no one would try to get her in trouble again, I said, and he nodded. You suspected the same thing I did, Kyle said. I was wondering why anyone would want to set her up like that, and now I know why. And I think Lola is behind this because it was unusual that she would come to your room at that exact time with Nixon. When did she become friends with that bastard? Kyle asked. And I did not think of it in that way. I got up and changed my clothes. Kyle, come with me to the king's chambers, I said, and he stood up wondering why. I am not letting the Sudiine Dean go, I said, and he nodded. I got to my father's chambers and found he was alone. How are you feeling, son? He asked me, and I told him I was fine. I asked Kyle to wait outside, and he did. Father, I would like to look deep into the CNN, I said, and he frowned. I thought you said I should let the moon go. Did you find out something? He asked, and I shook my head. Father, we both know she didn't do this. She has no reason to, even if you think so. She is too gentle to even think of enacting revenge. The doctor said he found bacteria and silver dust in my food. The silver was not enough to kill me, but it was enough to cause trouble for my food taster, I said. And he laughed. If she was doing her job, the silver wouldn't have gotten there in the first place. He said, I understand. I didn't think I needed to watch my back, but I guess now I do, and that is why I have moved her to wardrobe duty, I said. And he raised an eyebrow. Yes, Father, only Bloods would work on my meals, so that next time an issue happens, proper investigations would be carried out, I told him, and he nodded. Must this girl work in your apartment? Must she render a service that she would be in your room? I honestly hope she is not the reason you are yet to accept Lola, my father said. And I got angry knowing she was the one that coveted my food. I do not want that girl, Father, and if you keep trying to shove her down my throat, I will remain celibate and never claim her or anyone, and his eyes widened with fear. I knew he wanted grandchildren. The ash did not only come with cancer, it also rendered some men impotent. My father wanted a grandchild so badly to be sure his bloodline would carry on. As things were, he had 0 sperm count, and that was why I had to remain indoors most of the time to maintain the quality of my sperm. My father would do anything to have grandchildren. If you don't want her, then what do you want? Who do you want? He asked, and I couldn't answer because he would hate my answer. Don't be silent, son, because I sense you have your eyes set on someone, he said, and I shook my head and tried to play it off. There was no way I was going to let him have a reason to hurt Desiree. You want that moon girl, right? He asked, and I shook my head quickly because of the scorn in his eyes. Well, too bad, he said, and went to sit on his favorite couch. Why too bad? I asked him, pretending not to be interested in what he had to say. You are my only son, and I do not want you to be unhappy. The king declared my fate with a cold finality. I was to be a silent guardian of their royal legacy. I was bound to this palace, a captive piece in a grand game of bloodlines, forced to ensure the future of a crown that had once crushed my own. But since you are not interested, there is no need for that, he said nonchalantly, and I suspected it was a trap. But I had to be wise in case he was serious. Well, if you want me to have a mistress, I would take one when I find one who is worthy, I said. And he looked at me. Don't go sleeping with all the pretty moons because of this. You are only allowed one, but she will never be blood. And her child would never be an heir, and you will choose a bloodmate after. That will bear me grandchildren, he said, and I nodded. I do not fancy any moon now, so there is no need for that, I said, and his face dropped. I suspected my father was setting a trap, and I wasn't going to fall into it. I am launching an investigation, Father, and when I find the culprit, he or she would be dealt with mercilessly. I told my father, do what you want. But think of what I have told you about a mate and an heir. These are tough times, son, and we are yet to invent the device that will clear the ash. The witch wars will get to our country. We have to be ready, and you have to have a child that will succeed you in case we fall, he said. And I nodded and stood up. I left him, and Kyle and I went on a stroll. Kyle, Desiree will be coming of age next month on the 26th. I want you to arrange something private and special for us. I told him he wasn't comfortable, but I knew he would do it because he was my friend. Once you accept the bond and take her, there will be no going back, he warned. And I smiled at him because I knew I was ready to go above and beyond for her sake. I went to see Desiree in the night. She was glad to see me. I knew something was changing in her. Her wolf must be emerging because she responded differently to my touch. It was more intense and highly sensual. I wished I could take her, but I knew I had to wait until she was of age. We had a long make-out session. It was intense and it was hot. I couldn't get enough of her. And neither could Christoph. I knew she wanted me. Her scent filled my senses, and I did something against my better judgment. That night, moonlight fell on her face, and her eyes were full of shattered stars. I slowly withdrew my hand and pulled her into my arms. Some boundaries we crossed, but never put into words. It was hot and intense, and she called my name. We cuddled and slept. 2 weeks later, my yard duties were finally over, and I could rest. I had told Auntie Margaret that I wasn't going to leave. I couldn't. I had fallen in love with Adam completely. Even though neither of us had professed our love to each other, the feeling was mutual, and I hoped that our case would be different. For both our sakes, I hoped we survived whatever came our way. Adam had taken me off food tasting duty, and I was glad. He made sure the new food taster ate and waited 1 hour before eating the meal. I was put on wardrobe duty, but the bloods working for Adam would have done all the work before I arrived. Adam basically just wanted to keep me around him because I literally had no job. All we did was make out for most of the duration, and then I would leave. He would come to my room at night and continue. As every day passed, I wished we could actually be together, and I prayed to the moon goddess to make it so. While he lay next to me on my bed, I admired his face, and my heart broke. I knew deep down whatever we had would be short-lived because of the rules of our country. I cried inside me because this was my country, my land. I was meant to be a princess, the daughter of the next alpha. And maybe the next alpha. I was a servant in what used to be my country. Silent tears fell from my eyes because the only reason I prayed so hard to the moon goddess about me and Adam was that deep down, I knew he did not have the power to make it happen. My heart was too attached to leave him. I didn't want to die. But I knew I was playing with death. I was summoned by the king the next day, and I almost peed on myself when I heard Mistress's voice in my head asking me to report to the king's chamber. I honestly did not know what to do. I was afraid. I tried to link Adam to inform him while I made my way to the king's chambers, but I couldn't reach him. I was shaken with fear. Questions filled my mind. Did he know? Did someone see us? I was so scared. When I got to the entrance of his chambers, the fear I felt increased. I was led in by Beta Green, and I kept my head bowed. I was led to the king's bedroom, and I knelt immediately with my head down the moment I smelled his presence. Tears had begun to stream down my cheeks. I just had a week, and some days to go before my 18th birthday. I wondered if I would live to see it. Leave us! I heard the king say to his beta. The man hesitated because his scent lingered, and then he left eventually. Desiree Dawson, the king said. Yes. Your Majesty, I replied with a shaky voice. I was already crying. Where was Adam to come and protect me from this man? I have heard a lot of rumors, especially from my son's future maid about you and him. Are they true? He asked. And I knew I had to lie and make it believable. The only way to do it was to believe my lies. No, Your Majesty, I am insignificant to the prince, I said. And he paused a while. You better not lie to me, little girl. If I find out otherwise, you will pay the price. Confess now, and I will pardon you, he said. But I knew it was a trick. The prince is kind to me, but there is nothing between us. I am still a virgin, Your Majesty. You can have me checked, I said quickly. And he began to laugh. Being a virgin does not make the rumors false. He might just be waiting for you to come of age, he said. And I kowtowed severally, hitting my forehead on the ground out of fear. Stop that! The king yelled at me, and I shook with fear. Are you in love with my son? He asked. A servant like me can never dream of it, Your Majesty. His Highness is above my station, I said with so much fear, and I kept my head on the ground. Then, how come you smell of him? He asked me, and I quickly spoke. I work on his wardrobe, Your Majesty, I said. And he laughed wickedly. I would have believed that explanation if he didn't smell of you too, he said, and I didn't know how to wiggle out of it. I began to cry seriously. I wept because there was no coming out of this. Normally, I should kill you for this, But your mother's bloodline is too important, and with her on her deathbed leaves me with you. You or your child might inherit the moon magic, and because of that, I will spare your life," he said, and I didn't know how to feel about it. Adam has never taken interest in any wolf. You seem to be an exception, and because of that I will allow you two to mate, and you must give me a grandchild that will carry your bloodline's moon magic. I know the moon magic comes with the one with turquoise eyes. You will keep bearing heirs until you have one, of which you will hand over to me. You will never be seen with Adam as an equal in public. You will get some respect being the mother of my grandchildren, but you will not be Luna, nor will you be queen. And I froze. This was a bad situation. Until I gave birth to a child with moon magic, the turquoise eyes was a theory, and it wasn't certain, because I have had two ancestors that had clear blue eyes with the moon magic. I froze because this was a permanent form of slavery. How will I be able to run now that he had chosen to mate me to his son? You will not be his official mate. You will just bear his children, and your children will never be king or hold any position in this country. If they do not have moon magic, they will be regarded as commoners, but they will be bloods. The only way they could attain royal status is if his mate fails to bear him children. You will not be allowed to live with him in his chambers. He will come to you only when he needs you," he added, and I asked a brave question. "The prince doesn't fancy me, your majesty. He will reject this offer. Please let me continue as a servant so I can care for my mother," I said. And he began to laugh. "You are still maintaining this lie. Moon," he said angrily, and I honestly did not know what else to do. I tried to link Adam again, and this time, I got him. "I am in your father's chambers. Please come and save me," I quickly said, and broke off the connection before the king could pick up on it. "Look at me," he said, and I looked at him reluctantly. "You are indeed a beauty. I would have taken you for myself, but it would be a waste of a good bloodline," King Kingston said, and sat on his couch. "Adam will claim you on your 18th birthday or immediately after. You will be taken off the servant list. See yourself more as his mistress. I honestly hope you can keep up," he said with a sinister smile, and that was when Adam entered. "Father," Adam said, and the king smiled. "A son. I asked them to call you, but you weren't in the building. Thank goddess you have come. Since you have been fooling around with the help, I have decided to join you two under several conditions," the king said. Adam was about to speak, but he stopped him. "You will claim her on or after her birthday, and she must bear me grandchildren with moon magic. She is not going to live with you. She will be given her quarters and taken off the servant list, but she will never be your equal. She can never be Luna, nor will she be queen. When the time comes, you will claim Lola and make her your Luna. Lola's children will succeed you. Desiree's children will be bloods and nothing else," he said in a rush. "I will never claim Lola," Adam said, and I realized he had slipped off. "Ah," the king said, wide-eyed, "you reject Lola but not Desiree," he said, and I became scared that the king had planned all this to know the truth. "I must tell you, I am disappointed in you, son," he said, and then looked at me with wicked eyes. "I would have had you executed right now for lying to me about your relationship with my son and breaking the rules by getting involved with him if it weren't for your bloodline," the king said, and I began to cry. "Leave her alone, father. So now you know," Adam said boldly, and I knew he was going to get me killed. "You dare to speak to me in that tone," his father said, and I didn't know what to do. I couldn't leave, and neither could I stop what was happening. "Watch your tongue, young man. You are lucky. You are my only heir," he said. "You will not dictate the course of my love life, father," Adam said. "No one told you what to do. You wouldn't force me," he said, and his father began to laugh. "When I lock Desiree up and have her dealt with by enforcers, you will feel differently," the king said, and Adam calmed down a bit. "You either accept my terms, or I mate her to someone else." "Yes," They will not be my grandchildren, but they might inherit the moon magic, which is all I am after, he said, and Adam froze. The only reason I offered this is to please you, son, because I know you won't be able to handle seeing another wolf with her. But if you defy me any more than you already have, I will do my worst, and you wouldn't like it, the king said. And Adam looked at me. I am sorry, Desiree, he said through the mind link. I promise I will make it work, he assured me. And I didn't say a word because the truth was other than the fact that he will in the future claim a blood as his Luna. It was a better deal than death or sneaking around. It is okay, I told Adam, and he nodded to his father. I will accept under one condition, Adam said. You call off the engagement with Lola. If I am to choose a blood Luna, it won't be her, and I am not ready to choose now, Adam said, and his father looked at him long and hard. If I call it off, you will have to watch your back because Beta Green will not be in your favor anymore, the king said, and Adam looked at him dead in the face. Then I will follow in your footsteps and wipe them out, Adam said, and his father began to laugh. I was dismissed, and Adam remained. I left in a hurry and ran to my room. I honestly didn't know how to feel, but I knew as good as it might sound. It wasn't a good thing,